All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. We might just take a minute or two to get people in the room, but we're really excited that you are here joining us for the very first episode of the 2026 MPDC webinar series. So thanks so much for joining us, and give us just maybe a minute or two for folks to join, and then we will get going. All righty. Again, welcome for those who are just now joining. We are so excited that you are here with us for our very first episode of the 2026 MPDC webinar series. We will go ahead and get started. I imagine people will kind of trickle in as we go, but we'll just go ahead and make sure we go and get off the bat with a really good intro. So I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Lindsay Deneen. I'm the Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project MedTech, and I am very honored and thrilled to be co-hosting the 2026 webinar series with McKay Knoll, and delighted to have him introduce himself in just a second. But before we do that, I just want to share a little bit about this particular webinar series for 2026. The purpose of this series in particular is to demystify the complex life cycle of pediatric medical device development by bridging the gap between clinical necessity and commercial viability. It aims to educate participants by providing actionable insights on the regulatory design and funding hurdles unique to the pediatric orphan market, while simultaneously connecting the MPDC ecosystem with prospective funders, clinicians, and investors. Ultimately, the series seeks to inspire the community through guest stories that prove the pediatric path, while challenging, is both navigatable and profoundly impactful. So thank you for being here. This is just the very first episode, and this is all about who is the MPDC. So excited to have McKay join us and share about the incredible organization that the MPDC is, and just what makes it unique. How can you get involved? And what are some of the really cool stories that are coming out of this ecosystem? So with that, McKay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is McKay Knoll. I'm the Managing Director for the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium, or MPDC for short. I'm currently housed at Nationwide Children's, which is one of the main members of the consortium. My background is in engineering and product development for medical devices, and I spent a number of years in the industry doing medical device development as well as regulatory consulting, and have been with the consortium now for a few years, and happy to jump into things. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into exactly who the MPDC is, one of the things that we want to do with this series is really explore the people behind the organizations, right? And I would love if you would be willing to share a little bit about your background, which you did a little bit, but I'm
Sure,
curious
yeah.
how you got into this, and then why are you so passionate about this space?
Yeah, great question. A little bit about me personally. So I did start my life and my schooling as an engineer, really wanted to change lives and be impactful. I think I was overzealous maybe as a young high schooler, wanting to do the Iron Man thing and try and build weapons for the military or things like that. And then I had some experiences in my early adulthood that really helped me put things in perspective on what I was contributing to the world, what was I using my skill set for as an engineer and as an individual. And so I pushed my career early on to be focused on medical devices and medical device engineering. I worked in a couple of teams that were very early stage concepting of new ideas and new medical devices, new products. And that was very exciting, very fun. But I, in some instances, kind of lacked the to what end impact for what these devices were doing or what I was making. And those were some great experiences, and I wouldn't trade them for the world. But starting to push my career more towards what was I impacting to the world. Obviously, I think medical devices is a great space to be because we're impacting the lives of all those around us, hopefully, if they're interacting with medical devices and healthcare systems or at home. But wanting to be a bit more intentional. And so I explored how to be a good engineer, how to be a good regulatory consultant, but ultimately found that I could marry kind of my altruistic hopes of impacting the world and being an engineer, product developer at the same time in this kind of hybrid med tech in pediatric, which is a very niche within a niche type of role. And I am very blessed to be here and to be a player in that space. I think med tech is a wonderful industry to be in. Pediatric med tech is unique because it is so small and it has unique challenges, like you mentioned. And that's kind of how I've kind of steered my career intentionally to try and be in this uncomfortable space, because I feel like there's a lot of smart people, a lot of dedicated, collaborative folks that want to impact the world through medtech, and pediatrics is often underserved, and people want to jump in and help with kids. I have kids. Many of the people that we work with have kids, and kind of feel the heart pangs of wanting to help the younger generation and the rising generation as well. So long-winded, but hopefully that adds to things.
No, I love that. And I am actually really curious. So when you were, say, 6, 7, 8-year-old you, did you know you wanted to be an engineer, or was this something that you developed into?
Yeah, great question. I think there was definitely that knack for being an engineer and being some sort of scientist in a lab. I did want to try and bridge people a little bit more as I kind of got older, because I saw that being smart was one thing, but being able to communicate effectively with teams and translate technical needs and technical wants was a different skill set too. So early on, definitely wanted to be that scientist, that engineer. Thankfully, one of my kids has already followed suit and wants to be an engineer too. So I'm very tickled by that. But I think early on, always wanted to use my sharp, intuitive skills to try and help people.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, and so out of curiosity, are there any particular moments when you decided, hey, I want to use my engineering skills for good, so to speak, and especially in medical device, and then even more niche down into pediatrics? Are there any moments that just stand out to you as going, wow, I am in the right place in the right industry?
Yeah, great question. I was early on in my undergrad years, I had done an internship for a prominent up-and-coming medical device company that was actually working in peds. I never really kind of thought that was intentionally why I was going to go do this internship for this company, but they were working on some cutting-edge medical device technologies in the pediatric space, and they were really early stage, so it was early startup, and that experience kind of gave me the visibility and hindsight to say, wow, they were really doing something impactful. They were going in a different direction than I thought they should go from a company standpoint, but they were really focused on helping their kids and their families and truly seeing the impact. And so me seeing that early startup companies, founders really drill that mission and really be laser focused that, they were going to do everything they could to help their kids resonated with me. I didn't have a family at the time, but I remember that impacting me really early on in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so for people who might not be familiar with, your story into getting specifically into the MPDC, how did your path ultimately lead you here?
Yeah, great question. I think having the proximity was a big thing. So one person that we'll probably talk about a little bit more is Dr. Chris, who is a surgeon at Nationwide Children's. He and Dr. David Ekman at OSU are the ones that are leading the MPDC. They're the ones that do all the leadership, visionary, and I'm more the legs to the operation to help things move along. But I came across David and Corey locally. I'm in the Columbus, Ohio, Nationwide area, OSU area, and heard about what they were doing. They were, getting this new consortium up and running. And again, kind of having this experience in the back of my brain and trying to figure out kind of where my next steps were, saw an opportunity and reached out to Dr. Chris personally. And I just talked to him and I said, hey, I love what you're doing. Do you need help in the space? How can I be helpful? And I think that's kind of where my early childhood experience was finally coming to fruition, where I was like, I could see an opportunity now to help someone that doesn't really know much about engineering or technical skills, but needs something in that space. And to marry those two things together was a match made in heaven for me. So I jumped on that, and Dr. Chris thankfully reciprocated, and I've been with that team for a few years now.
That's incredible. I love that story. I love when those things come together and you get to live a dream that you didn't even know was kind of possible in the way that it unfolded. So that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay, so at a high level, for those who might not be familiar, how do you explain the MPDC?
Great question. The MPDC is a pediatric device consortium, and the Pediatric Device Consortium is actually an official program that's sponsored and run out of the Office of Orphan Product Development of the FDA. So this is actually a federal program where early in the late, I guess before the 2010s, early like 2008 timeframe, the FDA was noticing that there were a lot of adult devices indicated when they were coming to FDA for clearance, but not very many, if at all, for pediatrics. And so putting together some legislation and basically an incentive program in these device consortiums to try and stimulate and to encourage more indications and more explicit medical devices for pediatrics. So the Pediatric Device Consortiums are actually FDA-funded grants. They're a P50 5-year grant in grant terms to actually facilitate the collaboration of these children's hospitals and local regions to provide access to resources for pediatric medical device companies. So we are a consortium. We're a group of entities. We're not the only ones in the country. There are 5 total. We're one of those 5 that represent different regions. And the FDA has frequently exchanged hands with those. It is a grant, so you do have to apply for it every few years through the FDA, and they sponsor specific regions. So historically, you've heard places like Boston, Atlanta, Michigan have traditionally kind of changed hands a couple of times. So you might have heard about pediatric device consortiums that are existing, and maybe they still do exist, but the ones that are FDA funded are the ones that we represent, where we actually have some financial backing and some additional resources that we can deploy for these companies.
Okay, very cool. Thank you. So, I know this is going to be a little bit sort of 101, but for those who might not know, what makes pediatric medical device development so different from adult medtech, and why does that difference matter so much?
Great question. I think it 2 regards. One is small market. There's obviously a narrowing of the medtech scope when you're focusing on a population that is aging out of themselves, where you have kids that are growing rapidly. The markets are usually pretty narrow for medtech specifically. The counter or the knock-on effect from having a small population market for some of these medtech products is that oftentimes that leads to an underserving in venture capital or to financing for those projects, where oftentimes medical device products or technologies are trialed in adults first, and then they're slowly introduced into pediatrics to make sure that they're safe. The clinical evidence is a bit stiffer when it comes to FDA regulations and clearances. And so you have those 2 things, the market and the venture impacts of small market size, small population, evolving population too, as well as then having the impacts of, well, these are projects that are continuously evolving. The FDA is struggling to see adult devices try and translate over to pediatrics because there is that clinical barrier of needing to then redo your clinical tests in a pediatric population. So there's kind of 2 deterrents, one on the funding side, one on the expansion of clinical evidence and getting clearance explicitly.
Right. Okay. So then how does the MPDC specifically help overcome those challenges for innovators that are excited about the space, but perhaps are coming against those roadblocks?
100%. With the market size problem, it is oftentimes trying to help them with the respective value of death. And I know that's not unique to pediatrics, let alone medtech in general, where we're trying to get stimulation of projects to try and get over a respective hurdle. And so the pediatric device consortiums have non-dilutive funding by sponsorship of the FDA to actually give to these companies to try and get them to that next major milestone. And oftentimes for our consortium, specifically for the MPDC, we're trying to help companies reach milestones that are going to have the biggest knock-on effect for when they are going to an angel or a VC investor to try and be as much of a lever as possible to get them the most momentum financially. Because if we can help show them, hey, we've done some preclinical testing at an MPDC site, it cost $50,000. That was a lot of value to try and show to other investors and to other angels, like, hey, this is a project or a product worth pursuing, even more so than our specific impact. And so we're really focused on trying to help them get to that stage where they can unlock the capital that's out there, playing in the space and with all the sharks of the bigger adult med tech, of course, and the challenges around that. And that kind of leads to the second part, which is clinical evidence, where it's uniquely challenging to run studies in pediatrics, oftentimes where there are more hurdles with parental consent and different aging populations. And, you have fractionated populations in different sites and different regions. And so the consortiums then act as that one-stop shop to say, here's a grouping of children's hospitals for our consortium in like the Ohio region, and here's a consortium of hospitals in the California region or the Texas region or the Midwest, wherever it might be. And so not just our consortium, but I think all the consortiums are trying to solve those two problems. How do we deploy non-dilutive cash and try and inject some stimulus into these individual projects to try and get them to a point that unlocks more capital and more opportunities, as well as providing access back into the children's hospitals to actually execute those things, to get studies done, whether it's a formal clinical pivotal study or if it's like an early stage feasibility, usability study, just to try and get, again, as much momentum into the funding portion as possible. That's long-winded, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, that's great. And so you're helping to also, my understanding is, kind of connect the ecosystem as well. So the various groups that are interested in investing in this innovation, whether it's from a service provider side or investor side or something like that, can come together and be supportive around the startups that you're supporting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we pull on the local industry as well as the broader national industry to say, how can we help this project? Obviously, we could maybe provide some cash. Our cash is limited. I know FDA and federal dollars are hard to come by these days. And so what are other ways that we can help specific projects and help inject some life into them to get unlocking more capital? And oftentimes that is making connections. So we have engineering partners, regulatory partners, CROs that we partner with. And a lot of our effort is to say, let's evaluate projects and try and see if we as a consortium can fund them, but then also turn them over to opportunities and matchmaking of potential vendors to say, hey, we couldn't give you, X amount of dollars for your prototypes, but we have a relationship with a local engineering firm that can help you, and we're partnered with them. If you don't have a partner, there's someone that we'd recommend. And if you don't have a manufacturer, here's someone we'd recommend. And if you don't have a CRO, here's someone we recommend. And that expands even to the children's hospitals themselves too, more on the clinical side of, can we interface or matchmake you with industry-facing engagements, vendors, engineers, consultants, but even on the clinical side with PIs or KOLs or people that are going to be using your product, value analysis committees, the hospitals themselves. And so we're trying to act as kind of a glue and hub to say, hey, if you come here, yes, come for money, obviously, for the grant that we provide, but also the resources that we put onto and the connections that we have available, whether it is in the industry or at the children's hospitals themselves.
Okay. It is so cool to see how you're bringing together all of these people who care so much about this. And I love seeing the dots connect. And I think there are a few things that make the MPDC unique amongst, all of the consortiums are obviously doing their absolute best to bring this technology to market to help these companies succeed. But I think what's cool about the MPDC is you have a couple of things that make you just a smidgen unique. And I'd love if you would share a little bit about some of those things.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we strive to do, again, all the consortiums are doing what they can, but we don't want any project to come to our door without some benefit or value coming away from the engagement, whether it's, yes, we can give you some grant funding because we think your project could really use that, or, hey, I made this connection with a vendor, or I made this connection with a doctor. We're very much an open door policy. And I think one thing that's unique about the pediatric medtech space as opposed to the adult medtech space is it's highly collaborative. Like, we work with the other consortiums, we work with a lot of children's hospitals, realizing that collaboration is going to be vital, if not mandatory, in order for some of these projects to survive and to get the momentum they need to commercialize successfully. And so one of the big things that we emphasize is that if you come to us, we're going to find every way possible to help you. It's not a, hey, apply for the grant, and if you don't hear from us, try again next year. Like, we really want to be a community and a resource hub, and pulling in the other PDCs to do that, and to say, hey, we are in Ohio, we're at Midwest kind of locale, but we're helping all these companies across the nation. No matter if you're in California or in Texas or Boston, there is resources here that you can tap into. And so that's one of the unique things, and also trying to make sure that we're engaging with the industry too, and saying to the industry providers, if you are an engineering firm or a regulatory consultant or a CRO, come here to the PDC and we can handshake you with all these companies that are looking for opportunities to spend their SBIR money or to spend their grant money that we gave them to actually facilitate their next steps. And so there's kind of this dual engagement of, we can help the startups and the companies and the projects, but then we can also help the industry try and get visibility to these projects and to provide access that maybe they were oblivious to, or these startups that are, on bare bones as it is, maybe didn't have a chance to engage with. So that's where we feel like our secret sauce is. Obviously, that's something we hope to replicate across the country, and all the other PDCs are doing the same thing, but that's kind of what we hope to engender in every engagement is, we're here to help you in any way we can.
Yeah. Well, that is a wonderful thing. And I remember when I first learned a little bit more about the MPDC, that just really standing out to me as, it might not be a fit, like you said, for the funding or whatnot, but that doesn't mean that there's not ways that you can help, and you can, help again, just even if it's connecting the dots and making introductions, you're going to do what you can do. And I think that's brilliant. In terms of the companies that do get chosen, like first of all, how does it work to apply for these grants? What are the cycles and sort of seasons of all of this? And how do people get involved?
Great question. Yeah, if you're looking for funding from the device consortiums, there is an annual grant that we put on that's available to any pediatric related technology. That includes adult devices trying to do a pediatric indication, that includes pediatric specifics. And we, along with the other consortiums, do annual, if not semi-annual grant offerings. And we often will publicize this, not only our own grants, but the other grants from the other consortium, to say, hey, in the springtime, our consortium friends in Chicago, the CTIP consortium, is doing their grant offering right now, actually. So if you go to CTIP's website, then you can see their grant opportunity. And so we all do this annual grant rotation of, hey, come and apply to the PDC. We have new funding every year that we give out these grants. And we do that on a regular basis for the official grant, but then on a rolling basis, if you just want to talk to us to say, hey, I'm not applying for the grant necessarily right now, or the grant cycle is not open, but I still want to engage with the PDC. So we have on our website, pedsinnovation.org, you can get information about our current grant offerings, as well as rolling applications of getting involved in saying, I want to present my project to the PDC. I want to see if I can get involved with vendors or clinicians, whatever it might be. And we do a pretty long analysis of saying, tell us about your project, tell us who you are, tell us what you're trying to get funding for your respective milestones. And if we can provide grant funding, we feel like that's a good fit, we're happy to do that, and we engage with you there. And if not, where can we still continue to support you? Is it introduction to KOLs? Is it introductions to vendors? What are the next steps that we can try and push you towards? And so we do that every day, all day. We're meeting with companies, we're meeting with startups, and we're also re-engaging with startups to say, hey, it's been a while. We didn't give you funding a year ago, but can we help you with your latest milestone, or have things changed, or can we help with your specific study that you're trying to get up and running? A little bit long-winded, but for grant funding specifically, there's usually a grant open between our PDC or the other PDCs, usually every quarter or so. So we try and keep people apprised to say, hey, every 3 months, there's usually another RFA or request for proposals or letters of intent from our PDC or from the other PDCs. For our PDC specifically, we typically do a fall open call for any and all indications that usually opens up in the July timeframe to then get evaluated into the fall awards. And then in the springtime, we have a showcase event. Again, if you go to our website, you'll see more details about our upcoming showcase a month from today in Cincinnati. That is targeted on specific cardiovascular projects. And so we'll often use our spring RFA grant as like a targeted instance, and then we'll have the general in the fall. And that's kind of our specific cadence. The other PDCs, they'll do theirs all at once annually, or they'll spread it out. It's kind of up to them. But like I said, there's usually every quarter, so at least one grant offering from the Pediatric Device Consortium specifically available to the public.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that's a perfect segue. Let's talk about the showcase for a little bit, because this is now your third showcase.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And I know you've had 2 successful events in the past in a couple of different cities, and this year you're heading to Cincinnati, and you're partnering with a couple of really cool organizations. So if you want to just share a little bit about what you're excited about this year.
Yeah, like I mentioned, we use our showcases to spotlight specific aspects of pediatric med tech. And so for this year, it's cardiovascular. Last year, it was software as a medical device. And then the first year was kind of our opening kickoff showcase. And because we are a consortium that spans the state of Ohio in the Midwest, we hosted one in Columbus, Ohio, one in Cleveland, and now this one in Cincinnati. And trying to do 2 things. One, obviously, to provide a platform for companies to come and pitch for these dollars that I mentioned, these grants, but then also to showcase to the industry and also the region of what's going on in pediatric medtech. What are the projects that we're supporting, the initiatives we're working on, the collaborations that we're pushing. And in particular, for this showcase happening in Cincinnati, our partnership with Cincinnati Children's as part of our consortium, the Action Network. This is a cardiovascular specific pediatric group that's focused on kids and implantables and heart devices, cardiac devices specifically, as well as pulling in one of our sister consortium in the Alliance for Pediatric Innovation out of Washington, D.C., to kind of pull a critical mass of innovators in pediatrics, but in our particular instance, focusing on some cardiovascular devices, which is a big deal. It's something that our consortium has a lot of expertise in between Cleveland, Cincinnati, and nationwide. And there's also a lot of need for that because oftentimes with congenital heart defects, you're finding pediatric patients as your primary audience initially, and hopefully they mature and become adult cardiovascular patients. But oftentimes you find heart defects early on in pediatrics. So there's a huge need, which is why we're doing this showcase in partnership with Action and with APDI, Alliance for Pediatric Device Innovation in DC, and trying to pull together this critical mass of startups that are looking for funding and trying to get into the ecosystem and pulling in industry partners and as well as the Children's Hospital. So we're this fun kind of trio of audiences between those 3 to try and bring everyone together, have a meeting space, rub shoulders, make connections, hopefully issue some grants and make some deals in addition to that. And it's a wonderful time. It's amazing to see, again, that collaborative spirit that maybe is a bit more cutthroat in the adult industry. I love the MedTech conference, and I love AvaMed and a couple other big conferences too, but it's very much like big industry strategics. And this is very intimate, and we're here to help kids. And Action is dealing with patients, specific patients, and have specific patient stories for these kids that have heart devices. And so it's very intimate, rubbing shoulders, bringing people together. It's really an amazing experience. So we encourage you to come if you're interested in coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's some really good educational panels coming up. And I was wondering if you wanted to speak to some of those topics that are going to be addressed, which I think are really important. And I'm excited that there's also the pitch competition. There's also a lot of networking opportunities to, like you said, really get to have meaningful conversations. And in keeping it a smaller event, I feel like you're really able to have those kinds of just meaningful connections and opportunities and whatnot. And yes, we will share some details of that. I see somebody commented, and yes, we can absolutely share some details with you.
For sure. Yeah, and we can get down to specifics a little bit more in these targeted showcases, where for this specific showcase where we're talking about cardiovascular and kind of going back to those two functions that the PDC serves in providing opportunity to get funding and also grants, but then also try and integrate with the clinical side of things. Our panels and the way we've structured the showcase has some pitch competitions where you get to actually see some of these pediatric companies talk about their technologies and are competing for funding, but then also having these panels that are focusing on how do you generate evidence for clinical trials in pediatrics, let alone cardiovascular pediatrics, and what are the unique challenges there. And then also one of the other topics we'll talk about that addresses one of the key problems in pediatrics is unique funding sources. Like, how do you find unique grants, philanthropy, family offices, specific patient funds, those types of things that you can use to really excel in the pediatric space, because it is hard to find big investment dollars that from big VCs that are more used to adult devices that have bigger markets. And how do you balance that strategy between adult indication for your product versus pediatric indication, and kind of which comes first and what do you target? So our panels for this showcase are going to be focused on cardiovascular clinical evidence at large, and how do you generate that in pediatrics, and then those unique funding sources, how do you get those capital dollars to really open up the doors and leverage your future success as a startup to get through to commercialization.
Yeah, excellent. So looking forward to it. There is information there for if you want to sign up, and then we'll also have a QR code at the end where you just easily follow the link and get yourself signed up too. But and actually, just to put another little thing out there are some sponsorship opportunities still available. So if you are interested in partnering with the MPDC and our partner organizations to really help bring this showcase to life and just pediatric innovation in general, there are some opportunities still left for that too. So we'd love to see you there. Going back to, well, actually you touched on something about the funding and whatnot. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, does the MPDC or how do we help educate investment groups that pediatric innovation really is worth that investment? Like, I know it's even sometimes with medtech as a whole, it can be a bit of a learning curve if you're not familiar with the investment component of it. And then you've got even more niche. And so I would be curious to know how you can help, bridge those conversations and talk about the impact that can be had here.
Yeah, it's a great point. And there's kind of two perspectives, one from the startup perspective and one from the angel VC capital perspective. Talking from the capital perspective, they're going to look at things very pragmatically in terms of what their investment portfolio looks like. And if you have a portfolio that's looking at specifically healthcare, or even more specifically medtech, and then even more specifically pediatrics, I think there are only like one or two, maybe three in the world that are very specific pediatric like investment funds for those types of technologies. And so the challenge that investment and VC groups are having are saying, do I want to take the risk of buying into something that's very pediatric focused as opposed to something that's both adult and pediatric, or adult only that maybe has a broader market, bigger market? So that's kind of the capital perspective. And I think there's ways to address that, but I want to address it first from the startup perspective, where I think sometimes researchers, eager parents that are inventing devices, or even clinicians think that, this is a no-brainer. And this is not true just for pediatrics, but I think in general that everyone's going to love this product and they're going to buy in, and this is going to really, impact things. And that's probably true. But a lot of startups don't take enough time looking at the economics, the reimbursement, the value-based care models that they have to fit in. Really, how is that going to impact clinical workflows? And so we, as the Device Consortium, kind of find ourselves in an interesting position where we see both arguments pretty clearly, where we can say, yes, VC investment capital groups, how can we help spotlight these companies more so that you feel comfortable investing in pediatric technologies? And then also talk to these startups to say, are you really quantifying the problem clearly enough and can show a reimbursement pathway or a value-based model or economically that this really is going to impact care, as opposed to something that might fall more in like an orphan drug where it's going to be, humanitarian device exemptions or like very few use cases. And maybe that is your pathway. And we get to help kind of advise both ends, where we're advising the venture teams to say, there is a market here. We can validate that from the hospital side and say, hey, here's a product that's going to help with, I don't know, G tubes, for example. We can actually go to the consortium hospitals and we can pull up what are those numbers. And yes, maybe companies have done some research, but we can provide some validation to say, yes, we actually see this number of G tubes being readmitted at the hospitals, and how can this product prevent that, and what are the economics around that? And then to the startup side to say, how can we bolster your economic proposal and your value-based model in your business case when you're going to VCs to say, yes, here's my TAM, SAM, SOM, and like, here's the populations, but like, here are the actual nuts and bolts of how a hospital would go about reimbursing this and the economics of we sell it at this price. And oftentimes great ideas and great inventions start with that. I saw this patient that had this need, or I had this kid that had this problem. I want to solve that. But then how do you scale that into something that's actually going to be economically viable, and trying to bridge those two? So we find ourselves in that space trying to bridge those two as much as possible to say, VCs, what do you need to see? Is it clinical evidence? Can we provide help to the startup to try and show feasibility that this has actually got some legs? Or to the startup, hey, can we talk with value analysis? Can we talk with reimbursement consultants to try and see where are you going to fit in terms of reimbursement codes and your economics? So that's kind of where we're trying to marry the two closer and closer together. But it's like magnets that are the same polarity. The more you push them together, the harder it is to get them to match. So that's a long-winded answer. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I appreciate that perspective. And I'm just really glad that you are in a position where you can at least facilitate those conversations and try to help understand what both sides need in order to succeed. That's great. So along the way, and I know the consortium isn't super old yet. It's still a little baby itself, but so to speak. But when as you've been helping these companies, are there any sort of stories or particular inventions that really stand out to you as just being, and I'm sure this happens probably every day. You have these stories that you just think, wow, this is so cool to get to be a part of. But is there anything in particular that stands out of just like, wow, I'm so glad we got to play a role?
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful things, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, with inventors that are sometimes parents and people that are really emotionally driven in the best way, to say like, my kid or my niece or my grandkid, had some issues, and I either can invent something or I can use my skills to contribute to the consortium to help with that. And there are people that are driven passionately by that drive of someone I knew. I have a chance now to help impact them. And there's many of those in the consortium history that we've seen, that you have these passionate parents, you have these passionate leaders that have personal ties to these things, and trying to come in from a consortium to say, we'd love to bridle that passion and help you try and solve these roadblocks that you're running up against when it comes to development or commercialization or regulatory. Like, how can we follow you and your passion and really collaborate in a way that is going to excel for things? Sometimes those projects are very have their blinders on, where they're really focused and they're like, I'm going to do this at all costs. And we can kind of come in and say, there are some things that you need to consider if you really want to make this successful when it comes to the economics or the value-based care, like I mentioned before. And so there have been a couple of standout products that we've dealt with that have been parent-led products, that we see that passion, we see that drive, and we can say, hey, from the industry perspective, from the FDA perspective, from the VPC perspective, here are some ways that we can help out. And I'm always tickled, impacted by those products and those families that are really doing things that are really going to impact their kids or to impact people that they see in their communities. And then, of course, researchers that are doing amazing research at the children's hospitals or adult hospitals themselves that are trying to get their patients and their clinics and their ORs in a better shape to try and help serve their patients. I think every product has that impact, and it's really hard to see all these pitch competition slide decks and these pitch decks where you see these kids that are struggling, and it really pulls at your heartstrings because 100% of us were all kids at one point. We all have memories, and life could be very different for kids that aren't as fortunate or have these challenges. And so whether you're a startup where you are a parent inventing something, or you say, hey, I had a kid or a grandkid or a niece and I'm an engineer, I want to jump into the pediatric space. That's where I think the consortium, in particular, our consortium has really thrived, because we have people that don't really know how they can contribute. They want to contribute, so they join our advisory council as a patient advocate or a lawyer or a clinician. And that has been, I think, broadly speaking, maybe not project specific, but broadly speaking, just seeing the community that's come together to try and support pediatrics in any way they can has been amazing.
Yeah. Yes, that is amazing. Yeah. So what are some gaps you see right now in pediatric innovation that you are looking forward to potentially helping to solve for?
Great question. Like I mentioned earlier, we have this unique position of having the data that VCs want to see when they want to invest in a company, that a startup wants to provide in terms of market size, viability, feasibility, even preclinically. Oftentimes projects or products that are coming to us are at a stage where they're not quite ready to do their pivotal trial, where they're going to have to raise money either in a seed or a series posture to get enough funding to do that. But they're advanced enough where they've got their prototypes pretty much down and they know kind of what their technology is. They just need to bridge that gap between, okay, I have this prototype and maybe I've got some test units that I can use, to then getting VC money to do their pivotal trial. That kind of bridge is particularly hard to bridge, for lack of a better term. Yeah. And the PDCs are coming in, particularly our PDC, to say, we can probably do enough to get like a preclinical feasibility, usability study to just validate that there is enough market share or market size or validity to your idea coming from a children's hospital in our consortium, that you can then take to a VC and say, yeah, look, I took this to Cincinnati Children's, for example, and we did this usability study with 20 patients, and here are the initial outcomes. Like, those initial outcomes are often enough for some investors to get more interested, as opposed to saying, you haven't clinically validated this at all. Like, I don't know if this is going to be a good idea. Yeah. And the more clinical evidence that you can do to de-risk those ideas and de-risk those projects, the more likely VCs and other capital sources are going to come in. And I know that's kind of where SBIR, STTR usually will start to kind of insert themselves to say, hey, we can provide you funding to do those early pivotal studies or those early clinical studies. And a lot of companies are queuing up in that kind of threshold of like, okay, I've made it past my respective prototyping early benchtop valley of deaths, and now I'm here at a point where I need to make that big step up into getting validation from a children's hospital or other children's hospitals and get an SBIR and then get to the angel VC dollars. Like, that's kind of where we're positioning our PDC to really try and help companies with grant money, of course, but then also just with resources to say, we have a process to facilitate these early preclinical, is kind of the term we use, kind of pre-pivotal clinical studies like usability, feasibility, and early benchtop testing, so that you can get enough evidence that you can then go to an investor and say, look, we did actually generate some evidence. That's kind of our sweet spot for the consortium.
Nice. Okay, as you look towards the future of the MPDC, what are you excited about? What are you going to grow into, as much as you can share at the moment? Yeah.
Oh man, so many exciting things. And if you've interacted with me or Dr. Chris, you'll know very quickly that we're very, very ambitious, and we've got some very ambitious targets for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And we really think about this in terms of how do we build an ecosystem. One of the things that we're deploying here in the short term is actually a matchmaking platform, a community platform, where if you're a consultant, a lawyer, an engineer, or a startup or a CRO, like there's a place where you can come and see what's happening in the pediatric medtech landscape. And we've structured a tool and a platform that allows you to look at those projects, see where they're at, see what they could need help with, and how you can contribute, and also benefit your company if you're in one of those situations where you are an engineering firm, or you are a CRO, or you're even a research institute at a children's hospital. Opportunity to take advantage of up and coming medtech opportunities in the pediatric space. So that's something that we're eagerly deploying this year. And you can join our advisory council on our website, Peds Innovation, so you can be apprised of those things in our newsletter for that matchmaking platform. And then long term, also looking at how do we scale nationally. You know, we are a consortium that is pulling on the local resources of the Midwest. And with our other PDCs across the country, we're collaborating with them to try and build an ecosystem that is truly nationally focused. So if a company comes up in California, that they can have a point of contact here at Nationwide Children's, or a CRO in Florida, or a lawyer in New York, you know, wherever it is, that we can truly pull together a national ecosystem. That's not just Ohio. Yes, we're going to lean on Ohio because of the amazing children's hospitals and industry partners here, but expanding that nationally to say, let's really make this what the FDA, I think, hopes that it could be in a community that's self-sustaining, where the FDA, I think, is going to continue to support these initiatives and support through funding, through their programs. But how can we really make this self-sustaining and really make this self-sustaining engine and provide the right incentives and the right funding and the right opportunities to the right people at the right time? That's kind of where we're trying to pull everything together into this community. And that takes people who are watching this call to really jump in and help out with that. We're trying to be a platform, the community engagement, the lighthouse to try and spotlight technologies to bring them to the right partners, engagement milestones. But ultimately, this is a collaborative community effort. And so as much as we can do that, we're going to continue to be that clarion call to bring come one, come all, to come facilitate that and make this a self-sustaining perpetual machine that can really help all pediatric companies moving forward.
Excellent. So exciting. Can't wait to see it and to hopefully get to continue to be a part of it. But
yeah, absolutely.
So of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're more than happy to help. But are there any other things that we have somebody who wants to be involved all of a sudden. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, please. I can speak to that too.
Yes, please.
If you are someone that wants to get involved, maybe you're not a pediatric startup or you're not involved in a startup, but you want to get involved, go to our website, pedsinnovation.org, and you'll see opportunities there for ways to engage as an advisor, as an investor, as a partner, in the device consortiums. And so just to speak a little bit about how that works, people who join our advisory council come in as people who bring a various array of skills, and we ask you a little bit about what skills would you like to try and bring to the consortium. Are you a regulatory consultant? Are you a lawyer? Are you a patent attorney? Whatever it might be. And we will then plug you into opportunities that we hear about from the pediatric startups to say, hey, I need a grant writer, I need a marketing person, I need an engineer, and get plugged into this platform that we're building, and that I mentioned earlier that we're going to be releasing a matchmaking platform. But then also, you know, we pull these advisors in to say, would you like to come and sit in on a review panel for our grant opportunities? Help us judge and evaluate, because I'm not an IP attorney. I don't know much about patent law. Can you come help us and just say, hey, you know, there's some things with this specific startup that you might want to consider, or they might want to consider. And that's a direct way to interface with these companies, where we often will say, hey, advisors, come tell us what this startup might need from your perspective. And then we can, you know, de-identify, for lack of a better term, your advice. And then we go back and we say, hey, you know, our advisory council was saying that your patent strategy could go in this direction, or, you know, we might want to take into consideration this hurdle that they've seen. That's a great way for you to jump in. If you're an advocate, if you're a patient, if you're a family of patients, again, those key opinion leaders of coming in and saying, here's my perspective, here's my advice. I would love to see this in your grant proposal or in your product as these startups are evolving. That, I think, is the best way to get involved, to get these startups early, which is where we see them. We matchmake and say, hey, can you provide some advice or services if you're a service provider or a product provider? And then continue to facilitate opportunities that we're going to say, hey, Margaret, we know you're an IP attorney. We really need some help with this specific startup that's looking for an IP attorney. And that's, again, ways to engage. So go to our website. There's more information there. You can also reach out to us at pedsinnovation.org. There's an email link. You can email us directly and say, hey, I want to be engaged, but I don't know how. You can reach out to us, and we'd be happy to engage as well. So go to our website, more information there.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, while we're waiting, if there's any more questions that pop up, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. But in the meantime, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you would love to share before we kind of close out for the day?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the big things that we want to reiterate is, this requires the community. We are very passionate people that work tirelessly when the kids are asleep and while we're at work to try and get more pediatric companies the support that they need, but spreading the word. We are a consortium of children's hospitals in the MPDC. There are consortium in California and in Texas and in Washington, D.C. Get to know the ecosystem a little bit. Come join ours if you're willing to be an advisor, and spread the word, because there are a lot of opportunities for people to chip in here and there. And the collective grouping of a community's impact is what really makes the device consortium possible, if not successful, in trying to get these technologies to market. So spread the word. If you have people that that are interested in medtech, in trying to help pediatrics, please point them our way, and to the other consortiums. We'd be happy to integrate into all those respective opportunities.
Awesome. Okay, it looks like we do. Thank you. We also do have a question. Great work, right. Lindsay and McKay. How does MPDC connect with Ohio colleges and universities?
Yeah, awesome question. We are specifically partnered with Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, as well as groups like Toledo, Neomed, and a couple of other local colleges. One of the ways that we engage with them is to provide unique partnership access to what we're doing at the consortium. If you guys have projects that are coming out of those institutions, that we have dedicated funding for Ohio universities to actually put money towards great ideas that are coming from students. We also have partners at Nationwide that have internships and fellowships where they're actually working on medtech devices at the hospitals that we also partner with. That's adjacent to the PDC. That's more of hospital-specific engagements, but we often will collaborate with them to facilitate grant reviews and advisory council impacts, and trying to facilitate that advisor and even key opinion leader interaction too. So if you're at a university and you have doctors that are experts in their field, we oftentimes will have companies that are looking for those experts and advice. And so joining our advisory council is a great way to do that. Or if you have projects specifically, we have some Ohio-specific resources that you can take advantage of as well.
Awesome. And then plus Pittsburgh/West Virginia universities as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's welcome?
Everyone is welcome for sure. If you are local to the Ohio space, obviously we'd love to see you, but come to our showcase and come to the events that are happening at Project MedTech, for example, in Detroit next month, our showcase in Cincinnati as well. Those resources are there for everyone, especially from the FDA perspective. We have some FDA money that's to anyone nationally, so that's projects anywhere and everywhere. And then we have some specific Midwest funding and some specific Ohio funding resources and partnerships as well. So there's opportunities for everyone.
Awesome. Do you want to pull up the QR code and then we can make sure people can get registered for the showcase? And again, the website for MPDC is pedsinnovation.org. So feel free to go there and check that out. And then let me just quickly do this.
For sure. So this QR code will take you to our registration for the event. Like Lindsay mentioned, Peds Innovation, PEDS innovation.org is our website. So feel free to circulate this to people that you think might be interested. If yourselves are interested, please check it out. We can answer questions if you have specific ideas about sponsoring at the showcase or participating, or people that might be interested in attending, let us know. We hope to see you there.
Yeah. All right. We have one more comment. This was incredibly informative and exciting. Oh, good. We're so glad. Exciting is a good word. I love getting to have these conversations and learn all of the different ways that the ecosystem is being supported because of incredible organizations like the MPDC. So McKay, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing about yourself and about the organization. And I'm really looking forward to this series. The next one in the lineup is another really exciting one with two of the wonderful folks from Ultra. They are doing some incredible pediatric technology, and I really don't want to spoil it too much, but do take a look at the upcoming May webinar and make sure you get registered. That's going to be a really interesting one, really kind of diving into the idea of how to design specifically for pediatric innovation, for safety and just the intentionality behind how that comes together. And they have a really incredible story. So really looking forward to talking with them as well. And that will be, I believe it's May 20th. So find out all the information. You can follow MPDC on LinkedIn. And of course, they have information on the website as well. But with that, I think thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the opportunity to share more about the incredible work that MPDC is doing and look forward to supporting the pediatric innovation space.
Great. Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks, everyone. And feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye.